The missiles included the awesome SS-18, equipped with 8 to 10 warheads. Just as bad in the Air Force's view was the way the new missiles were being deployed, in silos so hardened with concrete and steel that they'd need an almost direct hit to destroy them.
We had to have some more warheads. We also hoped that we could get a better warhead with better accuracy. And that was the real rationale for going into the MX.
The MX, then on the drawing board, was to be the Air Force's answer to the new Soviet deployments. Like the Soviet SS-18, it would have 10 warheads, but the missile's real strength was to be its accuracy. At its heart was a super-sophisticated gyroscope. Test of the guidance sphere on a rocket sled showed it could withstand the forces of launch and deliver each warhead to within a few hundred feet of its target, close enough to destroy even a hardened Soviet silo. Such accuracy would transform the nuclear age, putting land-based missiles on a hair trigger. Before super accuracy, each side's missiles were essentially invulnerable. There was no point in shooting first. Massive retaliation was guaranteed. But accurate missiles, pointed at the other side's accurate missiles, might tempt one side into striking first. One missile, equipped with multiple warheads, can destroy several opposing missiles still in their silos, unless that side shoots back as soon as it realizes it's under attack.
You're going to detect that attack with at least 27 or 28 minutes of warning.
Check your combined display 2. Quick alert! Quick alert! Quick alert!
You're going to know precisely the weight of that attack in 15 or 16 minutes. You're going to be able to make a decision to launch these missiles in, say, 5 or 6 minutes.
Good, into the valve, please.
And you're going to be able to launch the missiles in 1 or 2 minutes. And the missiles are going to be launched. And I know that, and the Soviets know that, and I know they know that.
That's a dialectic contradiction for you. On the one hand, I increase the accuracy and power of my offensive weapons, but on the other hand, my probable adversary develops a system that accurately pinpoints my ability to deliver a surprise first blow, so I lose the element of surprise. I can't deliver a strike which wouldn't be detected early on, and so the adversary, aware I'm preparing a first strike, launches his missiles from their silos. So both strikes turn out to be counter-strikes. And the missiles would meet and pass each other on the last stretch of their trajectories near the targets. So why deliver the first strike if both us and the enemy would launch missiles in anticipation of the attack?
That's the delicate balance of terror. No matter how difficult it is for us to assess and react, he must take into consideration how difficult it is going to be for him if we do.
A launch under attack policy, the only way to keep vulnerable missiles from being destroyed, places enormous responsibility on a nation's early warning systems. Too great a responsibility, in the view of most Pentagon experts.
Such a plan is fraught with danger. One has terrible worries about whether our warning systems would give warning if an attack were underway. You have perhaps even greater worries about a false alarm. And you have to recognize that decisions on launch under attack would have to be made by fallible human beings in a moment of incredible stress and in a very short period of time. The national position has been, as long as I remember, and still is, that we should have the technical capability to launch under attack, but we shouldn't depend on it.
We wouldn't have to depend on it if missiles weren't sitting ducks in easily targeted silos. What, for instance, if missiles could move or hide? The Air Force had earlier explored the idea of trundling missiles around on the nation's railroads so they couldn't be targeted in a surprise attack. The plan was soon abandoned as impractical. But when the MX was proposed in the 1970s, the question of how it should be based became the critical issue, not so much to the Air Force, which was more interested in its extra accurate warheads, but to Congress when it debated the Air Force's request for development funding.
In 1976, when we first came to grips with the MX, the issue of whether we ought to build it in order to make our own missile force survivable, which then put the emphasis on the basing scheme, or whether we ought to build it in order to threaten their missiles and, in the judgment of many people, lead us to a hair trigger on both sides, was at the crux of the matter.
This debate shaped the arguments for the dawning age of large, accurate missiles. What was more important for effective deterrence? The ability to threaten the other side's missiles, or the ability to strike back if attacked? Being able to fight a limited nuclear war, or if nuclear war starts, to assure Armageddon. The Air Force was itself divided on the importance of making its missiles able to survive an attack. On the one hand, it was actively conducting tests on air-launched ICBMs, flying missiles around to keep them safe and launching them from parachutes if needed. On the other hand, most in the Air Force felt a simple silo was the best way to base the MX, because that was the quickest way to get the missile into service. Congress objected.
The Congress said back loud and clear in writing to the President and the Air Force, we don't want to move to the next stage of development of the MX unless you can find a way of basing our missiles survivably. That's the problem we want to fix.
But it was a problem that wasn't easy to fix. This quarter-scale model MX was being used to test a survivable launch system. The Air Force originally planned to simply slip the missile into a converted Minuteman silo and eject it with a blast of steam. But if the MX was to be survivable, the whole system would have to be able to move.
Well, the MX was not the right missile to make move. It was too big. It was not designed as a mobile missile. And to make it mobile, we had to create a monstrosity.
But if making the MX mobile was to be the price of congressional approval, well, the Air Force would go along. It began testing a basing scheme that would involve digging an enormous trench across the deserts of the Southwest, a trench that would eventually run for thousands of miles. A concrete tunnel would be built in the trench. The MX missiles would lie flat on rail cars and run up and down the tunnel on tracks. Since the Soviets wouldn't know where in the tunnel the missiles were, it couldn't target them. Then, if the missiles were needed, they'd break out through the roof of the tunnel, their launching tubes rearing into firing position. Already becoming a technological monstrosity, the scheme got more and more complex. For instance, a giant transportable plug had to be invented to stop the blast wave of a Soviet hit anywhere in the tunnel from sweeping along its entire length. Ironically, at the time the Air Force was testing its solution to the problem Congress had told it to fix, the danger of a Soviet first strike, the Soviets didn't yet have the missiles to launch one.
Let me say the SS-18 and SS-19 were not developed as first strike systems. At that time, they just couldn't be used for that purpose. These missiles are very powerful. They carry a very large nuclear warhead, but their accuracy was very poor. As a missile